All right, so this is Chai Elul, 18th month of Elul, Tafshin Tet. Chai Elul is a Yontif, is a Chassidic Yontif. Is the day that both the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov were born, came from heaven to save the Jewish people, to infuse life into tired generation, and to get us to understand the secrets of Torah. Very, very amazing. So I guess in honor of those two amazing figures in our history, we will learn today and put in some of their spirit in there. We are studying Shmuel I, chapter 13, verse 19. We are in a stalemate. Imagine a week before the 6-day war, standing the forces of evil of the Philistines, standing on one cliff, and the Jewish people amassed an enormous army of 600 people, 600 men exactly. On the other cliff, I have some maps here from last time. If you just want to take a quick look at it, there is in the middle. There it is. In the middle, you have a little square, and in that square, in the center, there is Michmash. To the north of Michmash, that's where the army of the Philistines were camping, about a mile up the road, north of Michmash. To the south of Michmash, you have Geva. Geva, this is the other cliff. There is a bluff from both sides and a wadi in between, a valley, very steep, very deep. How do you call those? Not cliff.
Gully. Gully.
It says two. It's two.
Crevice.
Two cliffs, and in between there is a
ravine.
A ravine. Okay. So it was very, very, very high cliffs. Very hard to climb up those cliffs, and it was really separating the two armies. Now it was a hilly area, and so they were hiding behind those hills, behind those rocks, and we're not really exposed. It's not like in the I don't know. A field in Philadelphia where you can see miles away, Gettysburg. It's not that. It was more of a the Wild West, where you had mountains and so. So
is that spot identifiable
that
today?
That spot is identifiable today. Yeah. Now, the situation we arrived at that situation because. King Saul Jr., his oldest son of King Saul, his name is Yonathan, got into an unplanned provocation or disagreement with the governor of the Philistines and just killed him. The Philistines were oppressing the Jewish people, but with a degree, not totally, not a little bit. They were oppressing us in a way that they impose a full-fledged arms embargo. They would not let anybody open a blacksmith shop. So you cannot. There's no weapons cannot be produced, and we will see that caused some quite difficulty in an agricultural society, that all you have is a plow and an ox, and what do you do? So that caused but they put their governor right at the center, right next to the ark in Bet Kiryat Anavim, making sure that where the government is, that it doesn't go, it doesn't move, that we don't try something crazy. They did let us live our lives. They did let us anoint a king, but they were oppressing us to a degree. So into that comes Yonathan and kills the governor of the Philistines, and the Philistines cannot, it's more than about face. I mean, they can't just let it go. So they are amassing an army of 30,000 chariots and 6,000 cavalry and tens or hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers, an enormous army, but they don't start the fight because they are afraid a little bit. They know that we have the ark. They still remember from 10 years ago, 11 years ago, they captured the ark but ended up giving it back because it caused them more trouble than it was worth. So they were afraid of us, but they were not afraid enough not to oppress us, and they were not, sure of themselves to attack us. But they amassed an enormous army, and they decided that they will do something because they can't. So what did they do? They had a camp over there, right between Bet Aven and Michmash. They had a camp, and from the camp they had 3 units. There were the destruction squadrons, like destroyers, but not on the sea, destroyers on land. They sent squadrons of people and an army to destroy things. They would destroy the crops and the houses and anything that they found in their way, they would destroy. And they attacked north and east and west, but not south, where our army was. Now, where is the rest of the people? The rest of the people literally went to hide in any hole they can find in the ground, in crevices and
those are the Jews.
And the Jews were hiding in caves and digs and falls and anywhere that they can find. They're like rats, they were running around. It's incredible. Some people flee the country altogether and cross the Jordan River to the other side. They were afraid of their of this army of the Philistines because the key point was that they had iron. They had weapons made out of iron, and we had weapons made out of wood and maybe some stones. And that is, it's like today, you don't have an air force, You don't have an air force, you better run and hide because you can't win the war. And on top of it, so everybody ran away, and only 600 people, which were the commanders, essentially, the more educated, the commanders, the ones that were more dedicated to King Saul, stayed with him. That's not a lot of people to save the entire country, seemingly. So that's where we stand right now. The destruction squadrons are doing their thing. The main camp is camping, and we are on 1319, and
these are the people who wanted a king, but then
those are the
they ran
people
away
who
and they
wanted the
didn't
king.
support him.
Exactly, and this is exactly what Shmuel told them, that you're not ready, kids. You're just not ready. But you asked for it, so you got it. They were not ready, and this is a king that already won a war a week ago, 2 weeks ago. He won a war very, very amazingly, but they didn't have the courage to stand behind him. וחרש לא יימצא בכל ארץ ישראל, and they didn't have any blacksmith in the entire land of Israel, כי אמרו פלישתים פן יעשו העברים חרב או חנית, because the Philistines says they're not going to allow the Jews to create swords and spears, and therefore they're not going to allow blacksmith in the land of Israel. So what would the Jews do? Well, and this was true for the past 11 years or so, at least. And they brought the idea, the knowledge of how to create it from where they came, the Philistines, which was the Isles of Greece and the Mediterranean, some other areas in the Mediterranean where they knew how to make it, where they invented or they discovered that. We were not allowed to hold it, and they were the power of the superpower of the time, one of the superpowers of the day.
You said that they had won a war a few weeks before.
Yes.
Didn't they arm themselves with the conquered people?
No, because what happened is they did not have a lot of weapons, and the people that they killed the people with whatever they found, whatever they had, and mainly the enemy ran away. We were saying that you couldn't find two soldiers in one spot. They were all scattered all over the place. So what would the Jews do on a regular basis in order to live without iron? It's today saying no electricity for you, וירדו כל ישראל הפלישתים ללטוש איש את מחרשתו ואת עיתו ואת קרדומו ואת מחרשתו. So they all went down whenever they needed the services. In an agricultural society, they needed to plow the land, especially in the land of Israel. In the center of the country, there is a mountainous area that's full of rocks. If you use a plow, it becomes dull very, very quickly because of the rocks. It's not sandy. It's not a very comfortable ground to land to work. So they needed to sharpen their plows and their hoes or the shovels and their axes. And here we have two words that are written the same way: machrashto, machreshato, machreshto. So it's written the same way, but it means two different things because of the vowels. The first one means a plow. The second one means woodwork tools. So they didn't have anything to if they wanted to create a table, a chair from wood, they had to do it with stone. They had to do it with old methods rather than use knives and tools that are meant for woodwork. So what would they do? So a lot of them would go, especially for the annual sharpening, they would go down to the Philistines, down the shore, to Ashdod, to Ashkelon, to Kiryat Gat, to those locations, in order to buy the services. So by imposing such an embargo, they also got themselves a very nice income, because you can't buy the stuff anywhere else. And but people under these circumstances figure out what to do. So they figured out what to do, but it was very, very difficult. והייתה פצירה פים למחרשות ולעיתים ולשלוש כלשון ולקרדומים ולעציב הדורבן. They basically used files. Try to sharpen a big plow with a nail file. That's essentially what they did. פצירה פים, this is a file that had many, many heads, but it was small and it was not meant for this kind of work. But they would do it. That's the only thing that they had. So instead of some of them, instead of going to the Philistines to buy they had to buy it from them anyway. But even to sharpen it, they would sharpen it at home with a very, very meager and weak tools. And they did it with the plows and with the hoes and with the pitchforks, the three-pronged pitchfork, ולקרדומים and the axes. What they did is it's basically describing the daily hardship that was caused by it. What is a dorban? A dorban is the piece that connects all kinds of pieces to the cattle. So you had
harness.
It's connected to the harness. Okay, so you had 2 cows or 2 oxes, and in between there is a piece of wood, a log of wood, and on the back there is a piece of wood. But in order to connect the plow to it, you needed, it wasn't, they didn't have, snap in, snap out type of assembly. They needed to put a nail or something strong through it, which is called a dorban. Now, in order to have something strong like that, you needed iron for it, and it needs to be sharp, and it needs to be able to be driven through the other wooden parts of the contraption. And without that, it's really, really difficult. They had to G-rig for all kinds of things, and it was difficult. And so what happened is, vaya biyom milchemet, in the day of a war, not necessarily this war, any war. We had several battles and skirmishes, and throughout the years, it was not a nice, peaceful time. So in any battles, we didn't have a sword or a spear in the entire nation. At Shaul and Yonathan. So all the people that were with Shaul and Yonathan, all the 600 people, none of them had any weapons. And because the entire country didn't have any weapons. Vatimatzel Shaul v'Yonatan bno. And Rashi says that it was a miracle, and we found 2 swords. And 2 swords were given to Saul and Yonatan. And you have 2 swords to fight the entire army that has 36,000 experienced soldiers, plus many, many tens of thousands of just, other people who are ready to kill and have the weapons to do it with. So this is the end of the description of the state of events where we are. So the last piece of information here is, we said that if you look at Michmash, a mile up the road was the camp, and from the camp you had those destruction squadrons going to 3 sides, to 3 directions, north, east, and west. Southwards, they sent a very small unit to watch over, just a watch unit, to watch over the Jews on the other side of the cliff. Just to make sure. Reconnaissance, exactly. That's exactly it. A reconnaissance unit, just to keep tabs of what they're doing. So that is the stage. Now, why did all of that happen? Because Yonathan killed the head of the Philistines. So you can imagine that the Jews who are running to the halls, and they all don't have how to fight, and they see this big army. They were not exuberant and happy with Yonathan, and they would really not. They didn't think that, they thought that the guys got them into a pickle, and what?
It's his fault.
It's his fault. So he didn't really enjoy being in the camp and being looked upon in that way. Even though his father, the king, was fully behind him, but he felt bad, and the people around him made sure to make him feel bad. So he was alone. He was praying. He was just to understand the man. He was a very pious individual, very, very special, very pure, very imagine the top rabbi of the generation. That's him, He was at an extremely high level, and he was, even though while he was the son of Saul, once he understood from Shmuel later on that Saul is out and David is in, he told David, "Don't worry, you'll be the king and I'll help you. I'll be your second hand, your second man, second in command." Can you imagine the son of a king yielding like that while his father is in power, because he knew that God decided something else? Very, very special guy. So they were not, the Philistines were very happy to destroy the surrounding areas, but they were not very happy to go and actually attack, face to face, a frontal attack the army of the Jews. They didn't know exactly how big the army was, but they knew the God of the Jews is sort of a dangerous thing. So, ויהי היום ויאמר יונתן בן שאול אל הנער נושא כליו. So Yonathan ben Shaul, the son of Shaul, right, was walking around with a helper, with a guy, with a young kid who would carry his things. So he told him, he was trying to fix it. He was not asked to do it. He was not told his father that he is going to do it, but he was trying to figure out, I got this this nation into such a bad situation. Let me see if I can help it. So let's go and we will launch a reconnaissance mission against the reconnaissance unit of the Philistines. Okay, let's spy on the spies. Okay, let's see what's going on with them. Now, he didn't mean to do anything. He didn't mean to kill them. He didn't mean to start a war, but he didn't mean to start a war before that either. But, it just so happened that he decided, the idea came to him to go and check him out. Asher me'ever alaz, those are from the other side. Because if you would stand on the side on the edge of the cliff, it's sort of very close. But to get to it, it's very, very difficult. You have to climb down and climb up.
Two sides of the Grand Canyon.
Exactly that, except that the Grand Canyon is probably a mile across, and in some cases, and this was very much way less than that. It was more like 100 to 200 yards. Anyway, so, and Veleaviv lo yigid, and he didn't tell anything to his father. Again, we see some of the DNA of Saul, the independence, DNA that passed down to his son, the independence of, I'm going to take care of things, I'm going to fix it, like very, very independent and capable guy, but probably not the right combination to lead the Jewish people that needs to be ruled by God through the rabbis, through the prophets. So he didn't tell his father. Now, just to complete, where was his father? His father was ושאול יושב בקצה הגבעה תחת הרימון אשר במגרון. So Shaul was sitting on that bluff, on that cliff, on that rock to the south of the Philistines, and over there in Geva, there was a town called Geva. There were houses, but he was not staying in those houses, because he didn't want to get caught in case they're being attacked. And he didn't want, if they send spies, the spies would go, first thing, they will check who's in town. So he wasn't in town. He was right outside of town, under a tree, tachat harimon. The pomegranate tree they're more like big bushes. So they have room, you can hide under them. So to hide 600 men, when you have a wild forest of pomegranate, is not a big to do. And it's better than to be caught, sleeping in a house comfortably and being attacked. So he was there. Asher b'migron. Migron was the middle point, as you see on a map, between Michmash and Geva. V'am asher imo k-600 ish. And this was several days after the events that caused this. When the Philistines came after this, it took some time. It took, I don't know how many days, but it took a few days. And what we're saying here is that throughout those days, he was not able to gather more forces. You would think that after the first day, thousands of people will go hide. But as the days passes and the Philistines did not attack yet, they would gather and they will come back to see if they can help. No, not even one person came back. So 600 people that were counted in the previous chapter are exactly the same 600 people are counted here. And now we get to a very interesting, strange pasuk. What is he telling us? ואחיה בן אחיטוב אחי כבוד בן פנחס בן עלי הכהן כהן השם בשילה נושא האפוד והעם לא ידע כי הלך יונתן. The end of the verse saying that the people didn't know that Yonathan went, okay? But the beginning of the verse is sort of, what is it teaching us? He's telling us who was the high priest at the time. So let's just recount the lineage of the high priest of the time. So Eli Cohen was the high priest 11 years ago. He died when he heard that the ark was captured, right? His two sons died in that battle as well. His sons were Chofni and Pinchas, right? And they died in the battle. Pinchas had a pregnant, he had several kids. He had at least one kid before. His name was Achituv. But he also left his wife pregnant. And when his wife heard all of the bad news, she gave birth. And she called the kid disgrace. Ikavod. You know, that's the name of the kid, because she was so distraught that this is what happened. She called this is like no honor. Ikavod means no honor, which means basically disgrace. So she called the son after that the terrible events. So now this Ikavod dude was a kid now. It was 11 years, I don't know, maybe a little more, but not much more than 11 years old. But he had an older brother, Achituv, and that older brother, because Eli died when he was 98, I think, if I recall correctly, something like that. He was old when he died. So his son Eli was also old when he died. And say 60, 70, right? And Pinchas also had an older child. So that child was already in his 40s. And he also had a child. And that child was Achia. So he's telling us the lineage of Eli. So the question is why? Who cares now what the lineage of Eli is and who is the high priest of the moment? So the point is as follows. The Malbim is explaining very interestingly. Shaul was relying, in order to get his orders, he was relying on Shmuel, on the prophet, because Shmuel anointed him and Shmuel gave him all the information. So he was relying on the communication with the Navi, with the prophet, to know what to do. He never used the breastplates, except when he was inaugurated, you know, but he was when Shmuel used the breastplate to show the people that Saul is the person. But Saul himself did not use the breastplate. The breastplate that would be the natural thing for a Jewish king to use or Jewish leader to use in order to know, should I go to war, should I not go to war? You ask in a breastplate, and there is a whole process, and the letters were lit, and you had to, the Kohen would have to have a Ruach HaKodesh to know how to put the letters together and give you the answer. But he didn't use that mechanism because he was relying on Shmuel. Now what happened in this battle? Right before the battle started, Shmuel and Saul, they didn't get along. There was a problem. Saul didn't listen to Shmuel, and he didn't wait the 7 days, and he sacrificed the sacrifice to God before Shmuel came to tell him what to do. He didn't wait till the end of the day. So Shmuel said, you didn't listen to me, you're out, and I'm gone. So Shmuel was not around him. And the breastplate, which was not around him on a regular basis, got stuck in Shiloh with the high priest. So the high priest was out of sync, was out of touch. He was not together with the king. The king could not use him. As a result, he didn't know what to do. As a result, Yonathan didn't know what to do, and he decided on his own, let me go see, do reconnaissance on my own. They didn't have any instructions. They were blind. They didn't have weapons. They didn't have instructions on what to do. They didn't have the breastplate. They didn't have anything. So this is why we're saying it here, that to understand who was the holder of the breastplates at the time, where he was in Shiloh. That's where Eli used to live and Pinchas used to live, and that's where they stayed after the war. And he was totally not connected to the king. So, and the people didn't know where Yonathan went. Okay, so where is Yonathan? ובין המעברות אשר ביקש יונתן לעבור על מצב פלישתים. So, in order to justify the actions of Yonathan, the Shmuel is writing here a description to let us and to get us to understand that he didn't put anybody in danger. It's not like he was walking into the camp of the enemy and was trying to provoke. He was in a safe place because there was a natural barrier that was very hard to pass, and he didn't really pass it yet. So, ben ha'ma'abarot, between the pathways. The pathway that Yonathan was trying to pass in order to see the reconnaissance unit of the Philistines. So there was it's a very impressive description of the place. There was a big bluff, a big cliff, a big rock, which is called from one side and a big rock from the other side. Now, usually, do you call rocks, do you give rocks names? You don't give rocks name unless they are the old man of the mountain or whatever, something which doesn't exist anymore. We visited him, and a few months later it fell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's me. What?
Vermont or New Hampshire?
Vermont.
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Yeah, that's the same. Anyway, but you assign names to rocks when they're impressive rocks. So those were two impressive rocks. And they had names. One of them, Botzetz. Botzetz means that it was very slippery. It was very hard. What?
Sounds like boats.
Yes, exactly. So bots is mud. Mud is slippery. Try to climb a rock which is that's called mud. It's very, very almost impossible. V'shem ha'echad sneh, and the other one is called sneh. And they continue to describe it. That's why I was saying that we know where it is nowadays, because it's sort of not hard to. It's possible. There are a couple of candidates, but we can identify them. שן האחד מצוק מצפון ממול מכמש והאחד מנגב מול גבה. So one of those rocks was a cliff from the north, right in front of Michmash, and the other one right from south, right in front of Gava. Now, by having those big rocks, it's not just a cliff like you get to the edge of the cliff and it falls down. There is, before the cliff, there is a big rock, tall rock. So the rock was used to hide the people behind them. The Philistines were hiding behind one rock, the Jews were hiding behind the other rock, and they couldn't really see exactly what happened. It's not like a plane with a hole in the middle. So Yonathan came up with an idea. He says, So Yonathan told the helper, let's go to the reconnaissance unit of those uncircumcised people. Why is he calling them uncircumcised? Because he wanted to accentuate the fact that, listen, even if us Jews are not exactly full of mitzvot and full of merit at the moment, but at the very least we have a bris. At the very least, when we're 8 days old, we got circumcised, and we have that going for us. And those guys that are fighting us don't have that. So God, at the very least, look at that. If you come to judge, if we are worthy of your help, at least judge by that. So אולי יעשה השם לנו, כי אין להשם מעצור להושיע ברב ומעט. So maybe let's go. Yonathan tells his helper, let's go to the other side, to the reconnaissance unit. Let's see, maybe God will help us, because you know that God doesn't have any barriers. There is nothing that can stop God from redeeming us. It can be a lot, it can be a little. We don't need necessarily millions of people in order to save us, because God is with us, and let's see. We are only two, because under normal circumstance, if you don't have a unit, you don't have a plan, you just you and a friend to go to the enemy, to the enemy lines, across enemy lines to try to save the Jewish people. It's movies, It's not real, except if God is on your side. Now, what happened here? His noseh kelim, his helper, somehow got even though he was a simpleton he wasn't a person, we don't even know his name, but he realized that there is something right about what Yonathan is saying, and he said, you know what, let's go with it. You do whatever is in your heart, because your heart is attuned. Your heart has a way of listening to the word of God, to the will of God. I trust you. So I'm going to go with your heart. Do whatever you feel, whatever you think your heart tells you to do, and I'm with you. So, okay, so that's hurdle number one, because Yonathan really didn't want to do it alone. So then Yonathan came up with a plan. He says, so let's have a plan. We're not going to go and try to sneak in without them watching us, because it's really impossible to go down that cliff when they're 100 yards away watching. They'll see us. So let's go down and reveal ourselves to the enemy. And we'll see what they're going to tell us. If they're going to tell us, Domu ad agenu alechem, stop until we come to you, like they're going to send a group of people to meet them on the bottom or wherever in the middle, and to check them out. And so if they're going to tell us that, we're going to listen and we're not going to fight. Why? Because that will be a sign for us that God doesn't want us to fight. If they're going to tell us stop till we come to you, that means that it's not the right time for us to go into war, and we should listen and not provoke them, which is, we'll see, it sounds strange. But if we're going to say, come on top of us, come up on top of us, right? Not come to us, come on top of us. So that means that they say, you're going to come and you're going to be on top of us. So then we're going to go, because that will be the sign, that will be the sign that God is going to give them, they're going to fall in our hands, and we should, that will be the sign. So I have something to say about this, but let's just read quickly a couple of psukim to get to a point, to see what actually happened. So Vaigalu Shneim, so they revealed themselves to Matzav Plishtim, they revealed themselves to the reconnaissance unit. So they say, those Hebrews are coming out of their holes. They're coming out of the holes in the ground. The rats are coming out. And they, look at them. Very sure of themselves. So the reconnaissance people told them at Yonathan. So they told him, they told the two guys, Yonathan and the kid, come up to us, and we're going to tell you something. We're going to give you a message. We're going to let you know something. Come up, guys. Come up, kids. Come up, Hebrews. They just came out of the holes. So Yonathan told his guy, come up with me, because God gave those people in the hands of the Jews. Okay. We will stop for a second and we're going to learn something else, and then we'll connect it. Okay? I'm going to give you a quick lessons in divination. All right? Ready? Go. Divination. Whatever, the divine, So, I'm reading from the Rambam, from the Ilchot Avodat Kochavim, the halachot that deals with idol worship, chapter 11, and it tells you that we should not be following any ways of an idol worshiper. not the way they dress, not the way they do their hair. We should not follow them in their ideas, in their science, in their opinions, because we're separate. A Jewish person supposed to separate themselves for these kind of idols, these kind of beliefs, these kind of ideas, and we don't belong together. And we should wear the tzitzis, and we should wear, we should dress properly, like a Jewish person should dress, and we should the hair should not be done. Nowadays he describes here something that happens today, that they take the hair from the two sides and leave in the middle, which is common hairdo today. He says that's not the Jewish way of having a hairdo. That's why I took the middle and left the sides. So that's part of it. Now, let's fast forward. One of the other things that we should not be doing like an idol worshiper, we should not practice divination. What is divination? Because it says, lo tenachashu. We should not, tenachashu is guess. We should not guess. Divination, from the word that we're going to divinely know what happens. You should not practice that. And he gives a very specific description of what does it mean. What does divination mean? It says, if my loaf of bread fell from my mouth, or my staff fell from my hand, I'm not going to such and such place, because if I'll go, I'm not going to be successful. If, another example, if a fox will pass by my right hand, I'm not going to work today, because if I'm going to go to work, I'm going to meet a crook, and he's going to swindle me. And if I hear some sort of a bird chirping or tweeting a certain bird, and that will mean that such and such will happen, good things or bad things. And then he says, anyone who makes signs for themselves, if something will happen to me, I will do something else, that's wrong. And if this won't happen to me, and I will not do it, that's wrong way of acting. And he's giving an example of Eliezer. Eliezer went to look for a wife for Yitzchak, right? Mm-hmm. And he went to the well and says, let's see which one of the girls is going to offer me a drink, and then we'll say also to my camels, that is the girl that I'm going to choose for Yitzchak. And that happened, and we praise it as, wow, he just asked God and God did it. So people commenting, how Eliezer was a very... So before we go to that, so according to the Rambam, this is not allowed to do. And they are in the Rambam, who is bringing from the Gemara, the Rambam himself doesn't say it, but the Gemara, where he's where the source of what he's saying is coming from, is also mentioning what Yonathan did. Because this is what Yonathan did. If those guys will tell us this certain language will stay put. If they'll tell us, come on top of us, we know that God will go win. We'll go to war with them. We'll go what? We'll go to battle because we will win. Come up to us. So you're not allowed to do it. Yonathan was a pious guy. Eliezer was a very pious person. He was, keeping with the Avraham Avinu, everything that he said. It was. So how come we're not allowed to do it? So regarding Eliezer, there is the answer, simple answer. It was before we got the Torah, and he was a ben Noach. He was a Noachite, and he might allow to do it. But what about Yonathan? So we have a fantastic answer. It will take an extra couple of minutes. Rabbi, I hope you'll forgive me. Thank you. From the Kesef Mishneh, from Rabbi Yosef Karo, he writes the explanation on the Rambam, and he explains as follows. And he says that whatever they did, both Eliezer and Yonathan, was totally logical. And he gives an interesting example. And the example is, if someone goes to sleep and says, if tomorrow morning it's going to rain, I'm not going to go on my trip. Is that not allowed? That's a normal thing to do, right? We do it. If it's going to rain, I'm not going to go because I'm going to get sick. It's not going to be comfortable. So people make plans that make sense. What's not allowed to do if you deal with something totally different. If my loaf of bread will fall off my hand, then I'm going to bet on the Yankees. That's not connected. One is not connected to the other. But if there is a logical relationship between what will happen and what I will do, that's obviously allowed. It's not divination. That's just normal behavior. So he says that what Eliezer said was he was looking for a certain type of a girl, a certain type of a candidate for a wife with good nature. And that is a way to check her nature. Her nature was, very giving and kind, and so he took that as a sign. He thought to himself, that's a good sign. It makes a lot of sense, and it happens today too. When you go out with someone and you try to see if they fit your values. And the same thing with Yonathan. What Yonathan did was totally logical in war, in the way you plan a war. How so? If they were afraid of an ambush, they would say, don't come to our camp. We will send our unit to you. Because they would be afraid to be taken by some sort of a trick. But if they're sure of themselves, they say, oh, come Hebrews, come, we're not afraid of you, come to our camp. That's the sign that he made. And the sign that he made fit very, very much with what can happen. What can happen is a reconnaissance unit is very small. As we'll see later, next time, it's about 20 people. And for 2 people to kill 20 people, it's not, it's possible. It's not outrageous, to kill 2,000 people, maybe not. But 20, it happens, Rambo, So it was all logical in his perspective, and therefore it's not called divination, and therefore they didn't do anything wrong. We'll see what happened next time.